From dragons to sphinges, from heroes to clowns, Magic the Gathering has about 300 creature types. In a recent video, I talked about 4 creature types that Magic isn't bringing back. People enjoyed that video and flooded the comments with other creature types that have been absent for too long. When looking at these comments, I noticed an interesting pattern that I wanted to discuss in this video. A lot of these creature types were either exclusively used or primarily used in cycles. Magic likes to make cycles. For those of you who don't know what a cycle is, I'm sure you've seen one but just haven't noticed. There are dozens, possibly hundreds of times in Magic, where if they like a card in white, they'll make one in blue. Then they'll make one in black, then a red one, and a green one too. These 5 cards are part of a cycle. They're a neat little way to show how each color would handle a certain concept in both card design and color philosophy. From the original Gear Hulk cycle, you can glean that white can do mass removal that is considered balanced, blue cares about instants and sorceries, black can kill stuff, red cares about randomness and dealing damage, and green cares about getting big. But unfortunately for some creature types in Magic, they begin as a cycle and don't get to live much outside of that cycle. Hi, I'm Harrison, I run these here parts, and here are 5 more creature types that Magic will never use again that were originally used as a cycle. The first one here is Monger, an occupational creature type from Mercadian Masks. It is a cycle of monocolored 3/3 creatures that cast for 3 generic and 1 colored mana. What makes them special is they have a 2 mana activated ability that anyone can activate. The white one hands out protection, the blue one hands out flying, the black one forces people to discard cards, and the red and green ones are practically mirror images of each other, one dealing damage to players and flyers, and the other to players and non-flyers. I have long wanted to build a Mario Party cube. A cube that uses multiplayer mechanics that are fully intended to lead to the wackiest and weirdest interactions, just like the shenanigans you'd experience in a game of Mario Party. And while I've been brainstorming this cube for a while now, these 5 have always been in that Moxfield file for it. Anyone can activate these abilities at any time, and while I think some of them are going to be significantly more impactful than the others, they're all just going to be so weird. Monger as a creature type was an attempt at implementing a creature type into the game that would work for any form of vendor. Monger, just like how it's used in the card names, is a suffix to denote that this is someone who trades or sells whatever object. The most common usages you might hear in day-to-day life now are Warmonger, which is someone who tries to stir the pot and profits from war, Fearmonger, who's someone who tries to stir the pot and profits from fear, and Cheesemonger, someone who tries to stir the pot and profits from cheese. Now, Monger is a weird thing to get a creature type. Most of these worlds we're visiting have vendors and trade dealers in some way, shape, or form, so maybe it just makes sense to pay attention to that and give it its own typing, but a lot of Magic lore is based around some sort of conflict. So I don't know how relevant it would be to include a shop vendor when the real plot of the story is about gods and planeswalkers and other reality-altering beings. It's fair that these characters will show up, but it's not like they're ever going to be the protagonist of a story. When you get a cycle of creature types like this, it becomes a question of, if this creature type returns, do they look like this again? In the next set they decide to use Monger again, would it also be a 4 mana 3/3 with an ability that everyone can activate? That alone at least limits its uses. Magic can only make so many copies of the same card, but we also kind of have the answer to how does this creature type work in future uses. Magic hasn't stopped making cards for vendors and trade dealers, and this wasn't the first time it was used either. In those cases, Magic doesn't have a typical go-to pick for what those creature types are typed as, but what I think are the 10 nails in the coffin for Monger are the 10 creatures that exist in Magic that have Monger in the name but do not have the typing. Ragemonger is a Minotaur Shaman. Glittermonger is an Elf Rogue. Spiritmonger was printed 2 years after the original cycle, and it's only a beast. So I think it's safe to say we've seen the last of Monger. The best place for these cards to have shown up again would have been Commander Master sets, but we've had 2 of those already and no such luck. Before I finish with Monger, I did want to point out that these cards do have creature types besides Monger now. They're still Mongers, but the white one has been errated to be a unicorn, the blue one is a human, the black one's a boar, the red one's a minotaur, and the green one, they just left it Monger? They really went back and gave the rest of them creature types, but I guess whatever Squallmonger is, they don't have a typing for it. Wild. The next one I want to talk about is Bringer, which is another cycle of 5 creatures, this time from 5th Dawn, 1 for each of the 5 colors. Each one is a 9 mana 5/5 with trample, and an upkeep trigger that ranges from holy crap, this could just win a game if left untouched, to wow, you really just spent 9 mana on that. They also have a trait that connects them all. You can spend Wooburg rather than actually paying for their mana cost. These creatures are all from the plane of Mirrodin, which roll up your pant legs because this is about to get a little messy. Mirrodin has several notable features, one of which is having 5 suns, which are also referred to sometimes as moons. If I'm reading into this correctly, they serve as the same function as our sun, but then they rotate around the world rather than the world rotating around them. Either way, these are 5 celestial bodies, one for each color of mana. These are kinda neat. Each one has a name and is made out of mana of their corresponding color. The white one is called the Bringer. I have to assume this is where the creature type got its name. It is a big part of Leonin culture on Mirrodin. The blue one is called Eye of Doom. Fun fact with that one, goblins can't see this one because, as described in the lore, the wavelength of light this sun/moon emits is not perceptible to a goblin's eye, and as such it's seen as a great omen. The black one is called Ingle. People believe souls go to Ingle. The red one is called the Sky Tyrant. Back to the goblins, they can't see blue that well, but they can really see red, so a whole sun based around red is enough to get them hyped up and throw parties whenever this one is hung immediately over top of them. And then the green one is Laiz, named after Glissa's sister, as the plot of original Mirrodin heavily involves Glissa, trying to find out why there were only originally 4 suns, which ultimately creates the 5th one. I want to bring up these sun moons because they were really relevant to Mirrodin. These show up on several different cards. They're mentioned throughout the lore. The cultures of the planes embrace them as part of their stories. Even after Mirrodin was taken over and became New Phyrexia, the moons persisted. And frankly, going back to the cycle of creature types, I would have liked if these guys could have done something more specific to their moon. This creature type as a whole are supposed to be the manifestation of those moons. The white one has connection to Leonin culture and also has several cards that care about life gain. Make this do something with that. The blue one would be kind of narrow to make something that is a blue goblin hate card, but the red one should have definitely had some goblin stuff going on. I think with that little touch, these could have been perfect 10s when it came to being lore accurate. But unfortunately, when it comes to lore and lore accuracy, these 5 haven't been seen in our trips back to Mirrodin. We've been back in a handful of sets as both Mirrodin and New Phyrexia, and not a single bringer. These creatures were kind of representations or manifestations of the plane itself, so it makes sense that while this plane is being controlled, imprisoned, manipulated, these manifestations of the world can no longer be accessed. And for a while, it was believed that this was another potentially extinct creature type. Their natural habitat of Mirrodin no longer exists. But let me posit this. The sun moons that floated above Mirrodin are actually now floating above Zhalfir. At the end of the newest Phyrexian invasion story, Phyrexia gets blipped, flung into the blind eternities, and replaced with Zhalfir, and now Zhalfir has those suns. I think if we return to Zhalfir and it gets its own set, we could see bringers again, but that's a big if. While I don't think we'll see this creature type again, I will say that this has a clear potential to come back. It'd also be neat if they got a second shot at life just like Zhalfir did in the lore. They're supposed to be the manifestations of the moons, maybe they could be the manifestations of what Zhalfir thinks of those moons. But in all honesty, given how Magic has a tendency to forget classic creature types, if we went back to Zhalfir, I don't think we're seeing these. The next one I want to talk about is Volver, a cycle of rare creatures from Apocalypse. I really like the design here. Each one is a cheap vanilla creature with 2 possible kicker costs. Each kicker requires mana of the enemy colors, so white's card requires black for 1 and red for the other. Each Volver has 1 kicker cost that is 2 mana and 1 that is 1 mana. You can pay for both or just 1, making this effectively a monocolored creature that gets better when you play it in a 2 or 3 color deck. The kicker cost that is 1 mana will always give your creature a single +1/+1 counter, and the kicker cost that is 2 mana will always give your creature 2 counters. This is where they went crazy with making everything symmetrical. The kicker cost also grants abilities to this creature, and each color does the exact same thing on each card. If you pay the white kicker, it gains a version of lifelink that existed before lifelink, so it's legally distinct. If you play the blue, it gains flying. If you play the black, it gains an activated ability that allows it to regenerate. Red gains first strike, and green gains trample. So as I mentioned before with Monger and Bringer, not all parts of a cycle are created equally. I really love how symmetrical this all is. It itches to scratch my brain I didn't know I had. That is taking the idea of a cycle to a whole new level. I also really like the art and the story behind each one. If you look at the cards, some of them feature creatures that would typically be found in that color, but they're using a weapon that seems outside of their color. The blue one looks like a merfolk that has happened to grow horns, and its trident shoots flame. The black one resembles a demon that is seemingly wielding a holy shield. There is some interclashing, mixing and matching between the colors here, and the result is the cycle of Volvers. In the lore, the Volvers are a result of the Wrathy overlay, which is part of the original Phyrexian invasion. The plan: make an artificial plane where you load up your army, merge your artificial plane with Dominaria, and then attack or something. I don't know what their big plan was with all this besides just causing chaos, but chaos it did cause. This is how we get oddities like Razorfin Hunter and Gaia's Skyfolk, where we've mashed more than one creature type together. The Volvers were mutant abominations in the middle of all this, but were also a sign of hope for Dominaria. The different schools of magic saw these abominations as the combinations of their magic with their enemies. But when there is a bigger enemy, a mutual enemy, these beings were able to fight against the Phyrexians and show the Dominarians that they should put their differences aside, at least temporarily, and come together to stop this Phyrexian invasion. Now, for terms of us getting back to using Volvers in Magic, I think there are a few major reasons why it'll never return, but there is one fundamental flaw, above all else, that I think will ultimately stop Volvers from being brought back. Mutants exist. The first mutant to actually receive the typing of mutant upon being printed wasn't printed for another year and a half after Volvers. But if Magic wanted to produce something nowadays that was in somewhat spiritually similar to Volvers, it'd just be mutants. And I say this as someone who isn't a big fan of the creature type mutants existing in the game. And even if they do deserve their own creature type, if you or someone at WotC disagrees with me and thinks that this is worthwhile to have these 5 little freaks still be Volvers, and not just mutants or some other creature type, you have to acknowledge the fact that we don't normally see a whole plane being overlapped atop another plane too often. The conditions we need to get Volvers has happened exactly once. Outside of the lore, into the mechanics, I think the cycle is just too symmetrical, and just a little too cute with it all, that if they did bring it back, they'd probably ruin it. They could never quite capture what they had here. So in my eyes, Volvers can't come back because they should just be mutants, Volvers can't come back because the lore needs extremely specific conditions for them to work, and Volvers can't come back because they're too delicate a cycle. My final group here, I will admit, isn't quite a cycle in the traditional sense, but is still mostly built of cycles. Atog. A quick note, I will be pronouncing it Atog. I do know there are people who say Atog, and if you're one of those people and are upset, please follow this new reporting system. Step 1. Subscribe to the channel. Step 2. Like this video. Step 3. Leave a comment about how cool I am. The first Atog was Atog, a 2-mana 1/2 Atog, printed all the way back in Antiquities with an activated ability. Sacrifice an artifact, Atog gets +2/+2 until returned. Simple, sleek, yet strong enough to warrant a ban and popper. 2 years later, we got 4 Atog, a similar creature in a new coat of paint. This time, it costs 1 mana more and is in green. Its activated ability requires you to pay green mana and sacrifice a forest. Not as strong as the original, but it shows how red has an affiliation with artifacts and green has an affiliation with forests. Though there was a 2-year gap between Atog and 4 Atog, the following 3 would come out one at a time in each set that followed. Chronotog and Visions, the blue one, instead of sacrificing any permanents, you sacrifice time. Skip your next turn to get a momentary gain. Definitely the weak link in this cycle. Necrotog and Weatherlight, the black part of the cycle, it eats cards from your graveyard. Probably one of the easier ones to set up if it wasn't for the weird line of text that requires you to care about graveyard order. An artifact of older magic that I'm happy we've moved on from. Finally, in Tempest, Oratog, the white variant, the one that probably strikes the closest resemblance to the original. The only difference being color, and that this one asks you to sacrifice enchantments rather than artifacts. These happy few really were the silliest guys from the yesteryear of Magic the Gathering, and Magic decided they loved them so much, so how about a sequel? About 4 years after Oratog saw print, Magic released Odyssey and gave us 6 new Atogs, 5 of which were the allied color pairings. Each of these bears a resemblance to the original batch with some slight modifications. If an Atog had white, you could sacrifice enchantments to it. If an Atog had red, you could sacrifice artifacts to it. Green no longer directly cares about forests or needs mana to activate, but instead just a land. Black no longer cares about graveyard order, instead just anything in your graveyard will do. And blue had the biggest glow up, just discarding cards will do. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the new big legendary Atog. Atog, this time requiring you to sacrifice other Atogs to grow in power. Atogs really worked well as a whole because you knew what you were going to get. It was going to require you to sacrifice or give up something to pump this creature. Some sacrifice for a short-term reward that, if you play your cards right, could be enough to push you over the line into a win. Then the final Atog we would receive is Mega Atog, who will be printed alongside a reprinted Atog on Mirrodin 2 years later in 2003. Mega Atog is ultimately just a bigger Atog. In the lore, they are originally from Dominaria. As it was with the earlier lore of Magic, all roads lead to Dominaria. They are spread out on different continents, and while the white one might originally came from Wrath, as mentioned earlier, that plane eventually overlaid onto Dominaria and became one. Most are typically seen as pests and nuisances, but don't let Atog sneak its way into an armory. Probably the funniest ones in the lore are Atog and Mega Atog, as they did end up on the plane of Mirrodin. A quick tangent, Mirrodin itself was created by Karn, and then it was named Argentum. It was entirely a metal plane, until Memnarch, the warden of the plane, started kidnapping creatures from other worlds to start inhabiting it. So essentially, Memnarch was living in this metal world and looking for people to live in it, and just so happened to grab a species that thrives where it can devour tons of metal. I'll be honest, I'm surprised we haven't seen new Atogs. It's been over 20 years. This is a fan favorite creature type, and not just a fan favorite. Mark Rosewater, head designer of Magic the Gathering, has named his Tumblr blog Blogatog, an honor none of the other 300 creature types will ever be able to hold. But we just haven't seen them since, and it might be safe to say that we won't again. We've visited Dominaria and Mirrodin/New Phyrexia several times since OG Mirrodin was released, and haven't seen one since. Also, with Magic incorporating more and more Universe Beyond products into their standard releases, there are going to be fewer and fewer opportunities that allow us to have a chance at seeing a new Atog again. I, for one, hope I'm wrong. I'd love to see a new Atog get printed. Its simple design reminds me of a time in Magic where you could read a card once and not have to read it again, which might be exactly why we'll never see it again. I don't think power creep is nearly as much of a problem as some other people do, but it definitely exists. And while these passed for rares at the time, they need to be powered up to exist with the current landscape. As a final goodbye to Atog, I offer up Psychic Frog, a spiritual successor to our Atogs, and direct evidence that Atogs would need to be powered up beyond recognition to see print and sell packs today. Modern Horizon sets are full of self-references to earlier Magics, so it's no doubt that this was intended to be a reference to Atogs, almost being a line-for-line reference to Psychotog. A spiritual successor might be all that Atogs get, from Atog to a frog. So there are 4 more creature types that we're never going to see again. Now that I've made 2 of these videos, that undoubtedly means we'll see one of these creature types show up before the end of the year. So let me know, which creature type would you like to see come back? If you liked this video, YouTube also thinks you'd like this video that's on the screen now. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to bolt your birds.